Hello and welcome back to a new video. My name is Morgan, creator of Strawberry Studios, and I'm very excited because today I'm going to be doing an acrylic marker review. Yay! Arrtx emailed me and asked if I'd be down to make a review video about their 90 acrylic marker set, and I was like, yes, let's do it. I'm a big fan of acrylic markers. I've already done a review on shuttle art acrylic markers, so I'm very excited about this one. Just to be clear, this isn't sponsored, I'm not getting paid, so you're gonna get my 100% honest thoughts. Without further ado, let's just jump right in. First thing right out of the box I noticed were these little numbered stickers that match up with the markers, and you can stick them onto the marker themselves or a swatch sheet. The only weird thing is they didn't actually give me a swatch sheet, so I had to then print out my own. I feel like typically markers have swatch sheets, so it's a little weird that this one didn't, but it's fine. I just looked up a 90 marker swatch set, printed it out, and that's how I did my swatch sheet, which is why it looks a little weird, sorry. All the markers match the colors really well to the stickers, other than one, the marker S50. This sticker looked really dark, almost like a dark brown or black, and then whenever I tested it, it was basically just a light brown, like a burnt sienna, and it just was not even close to the sticker, and it really threw me off because I thought, at least with that sticker, there were a lot more dark colors. And with that being said, overall, I'd say the colors are pretty nice, but for a set of 90 markers, I kind of expected a bit more variety just in the sense of values. One thing I really noticed a lot in this pack was that there weren't a lot of dark colors and a lot of dark values to use. So another thing is there were a lot of greens, but none of them were really any dark greens. There really weren't just a lot of dark values anyways, and that was really what was lacking in this pack, honestly, because a lot of the time when I had to do shading, I had to use a dark purple or a dark blue. Like in this photo right here, turn into grayscale, which helped you see the values of a certain color, and you can pretty much tell that a lot of these are kind of similar tones, like pretty mid-tones. There's a little bit of a patch of dark, but that is just a range of dark purples and dark blues, and that's it. I would like, personally, a little bit more variety, especially with browns. I kind of struggled to paint this cherry blossom branch because I did not have that many browns and I didn't have any dark browns to use, so that was a little bit tricky to work around. As well as pretty much all the greens being really similar in color, maybe a tone different. There was one obvious light one and then one obvious dark one, and then everything else was pretty similar. Personally, I just kind of expected a bit more of a variety for 90 markers, especially with like finding browns. The darker shades overall leaned heavily towards blues and purples, so I wish there was a little more balance in the color range. So as far as the performance on the paper, it goes on really smooth and I don't have to push on hard at all. Really, don't push on. You can give it like the lightest grays and it'll go on pretty thick. It doesn't bleed through your paper. And for the sketchbook that I'm using here, I don't remember what it is. It has a bunch of stickers covered the top of it, so I can't see the brand name anymore, but it's got some decent thick paper. I do have some pages in here where you could see that Copic markers would bleed through, but these markers had no issue and did not bleed through. Then I went ahead and tested it on printer paper, and I did about 3 layers of one blob. It didn't bleed through per se, but it did warp the paper. And then at the bottom is 3 values. First one is after the first layer, the second one is after the second layer, and then the third is after the third layer. So each layer that you add to the same color will obviously make it darker. Sometimes if I layered a bit too much, it would pick a little bit of the paper texture up, not in a really big deal type way, just a little bit, and it was noticeable enough for me to stop and let it dry before I continued, and once it dried and I continued, it was fine. But that being said, they do come out pretty juicy, but I also think that's because I opened them right from the box and they were stored up. Arrtx does recommend that you should store them sideways, which should help. I just grabbed them right out of the box and just started working with them, which is why they're pretty juicy. So just a fair warning. The dry time is pretty fast. I'd say within like 3 to 5 seconds it's dry. I would say that the shuttle art markers are definitely faster. I like the 3 to 5 seconds because it gives you a little bit of time to blend. If you're all about blending with your finger and smudging a little bit, these markers will allow you some time, even though it's like 2 seconds, but it gives you some time to blend it with your finger. You do see me do it a few times in this video where I blend with my finger, so it is possible. It's just not like perfectly smooth like you'd think. So if you're thinking that they're like Copics, where blending is really smooth and buttery, these are totally different. These could not be more different. These do not blend into each other, wet or dry. Especially wet, I would not recommend. It ruins your brush tip and your brush tip will just get the other color into it, so I would recommend not doing that. Instead, it's all about layering with these markers. And honestly, layering with these markers is really fun. Like, I spent, I think, about an hour each, maybe not even an hour, but a little less than an hour to an hour each on each of these drawings, and all I was doing was just layering markers on top of each other, and I had so much fun. You don't even have to follow the usual light to dark order that most mediums kind of have you do. These work surprisingly well with light colors over dark or vice versa. So pretty much I could go over anything with white at the end to add details or even cover up small mistakes, and it actually works. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the nib, because I really like it. It's a fine tip brush nib, and I personally think that a lot of markers should just have this nib and nothing ever else. It's soft and squishy to where you can get a nice variation for lines, thick or thin. The only thing is, since these markers are so juicy, thinner lines are kind of hard to pull off, but I do it sometimes when the marker wasn't as juicy, but also with a steadier hand than mine, you could probably manage it. I eventually realized it'd be tricky to get a super consistent thin line, especially for lining the artwork, so I did end up going over some of my artworks later with a pen or a colored pencil for the finer details. And honestly, on that note, they layered really well on top of these other mediums. I was more surprised that the colored pencil would layer on top of the markers, because I know colored pencils and markers just don't tend to get along. But overall, the markers paired really well with other mediums and vice versa. So overall, I think these Arrtx acrylic markers are really solid, especially if you're liking the layering type of painting, coloring. In general, even if you don't like that type of stuff, I think these markers are really great for experimenting and for beginners. I probably wouldn't recommend these markers for like a coloring book unless you're doing multiple layers in that coloring book, like getting really detailed, because just one layer of one of the colors of this marker, you can see the lines and the brush strokes that I make with just one layer of the markers. So I can imagine for people that color in coloring books and you might just use one color for something, these might not be for that, just because you would be able to still see the lines and stuff unless you layer on top of it to where it'd cover up those lines. I had so much fun with these markers. They're just so smooth and they're very pigmented and they dry really fast, so I didn't have any worries about smudging the paper. And overall, I didn't have any worries about messing up because I knew that I can cover it up with white or whatever color later on, which is really great for somebody whose really main focus is digital art and you can't just Control-Z everything. These markers kind of have like a Control-Z feature in themselves because you can literally use it to go over anything, and you can also just cover up any mistakes that you have. So yeah, overall, I had a really good time working with these markers and I had a lot of fun. I thought I was painting a lot longer with these, but then like looking back, how I said earlier, it probably took a little less than an hour to do each of these drawings. I was breezing through these and I just kind of think it was the markers. Like they were just so much fun that like I wasn't even thinking about it or thinking too hard, and I just had a blast with them. I think these are going to be really good for beginner artists or people that are just looking to have a little bit of fun with some markers. I just wish the color variety was a little bit stronger, especially with the darks and different greens and browns. For what they are, I think these are really solid markers. I think I spent about $70 on the shuttle art acrylic markers that only came with 60 markers, and then this pack, a 90 set of markers, is $70 on Amazon. Unless you get lucky and you get it for sale, because I've actually seen it for sale quite a few times. Sometimes it's like in the 50s, so you can get a pretty good deal on these. If you like these types of marker review videos, I have one from a few months ago reviewing the shuttle art acrylic markers, so if you are looking for a marker, be sure to check out that video as well. Thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you so much Arrtx for sending me your marker set. And if you guys are interested, the link to them will be down below in the description. Thank you guys so much for sticking around. Bye!